The legend awakens. The crystal towers of New Harmony stretched toward the triple suns of the Kepler system, their surfaces reflecting the peaceful bustle of the Stellar Confederation's capital world. Flying vehicles moved between the towers like schools of fish, carrying representatives from 15 different species who had lived together in peace for over 3 centuries. The Confederation was proof that different races could work together, share knowledge, and build something beautiful. In the deepest levels of the Great Archive, scholar Kelthera worked alone among the ancient data crystals. Her 4 arms moved gracefully as she sorted through records that few others cared about anymore. The Zenthari were natural historians, their long lifespans allowing them to see patterns that shorter-lived species missed. Her silver skin glowed softly in the dim light as she discovered something that made her heart race. "This cannot be right," she whispered to herself, her voice creating small musical notes in the air. The data crystal in her hands contained fragments of military records from 500 years ago, before the Confederation was formed. Most of it was corrupted or incomplete, but what she could read told an impossible story. The record spoke of a species called humans who had helped defend the galaxy against something called the Void Swarm. They described battles that lasted for decades, ships that moved faster than anything the Confederation had ever built, and warriors who never gave up even when facing certain death. The files were filled with tactical reports that showed impossible victories against overwhelming odds. Kelthera had heard whispers of humans before, but always as myths or legends. Some said they were the first species to master faster-than-light travel. Others claimed they were peaceful explorers who had simply vanished into deep space. A few even suggested they had been wiped out by some ancient enemy. But these records made them sound real, and more importantly, they made them sound like protectors. The next morning, Kelthera stood before the Confederation Council in a great chamber where representatives from all 15 species gathered to make decisions. The room was a marvel of engineering, with sections designed for species that breathed different atmospheres, lived in different gravity levels, or needed different types of light. At the center sat Chancellor Vorthak, a massive Krillian whose shell-like exterior hid one of the sharpest minds in the galaxy. "Scholar Kelthera," Chancellor Vorthak rumbled, his deep voice carrying easily through the chamber's translation systems. "You requested this emergency session to discuss historical records. I hope you have something more pressing than another debate about trade route origins." Kelthera activated her holographic display, showing the assembled leaders fragments of the human records she had discovered. "Honored Chancellor, I believe I have found evidence of a species that may still exist and may be crucial to our continued survival. These records describe beings called humans who possess technology and tactical abilities far beyond what we currently understand." Admiral Rexus of the Aquarian delegation floated in his water-filled chamber, his tentacles moving in patterns that showed skepticism. "Kelthera, these records are centuries old and badly corrupted. Even if this species existed, what makes you think they are still alive? And more importantly, why should we care about ancient history when we have current problems to solve?" "Because," Kelthera said, her voice growing stronger, "the records suggest they did not die out. They speak of humans retreating to what they called the Silent Watch at the galaxy's edge. And there are references to them monitoring something called the Void Swarm, which these records describe as a threat to all organic life." Chancellor Vorthak leaned forward, his massive form casting shadows across the chamber floor. "You are suggesting that somewhere in the empty space beyond our borders, there is a species of legendary warriors standing guard against some ancient enemy. That sounds like a story parents tell their children, not a matter for the Confederation Council." But before Kelthera could respond, alarms began ringing throughout the chamber. The great view screen flickered to life, showing Admiral Rexus's aide, Lieutenant Coral, whose normally calm demeanor had been replaced by obvious worry. "Admiral, Chancellor, we have a situation," Lieutenant Coral reported, her aquatic voice bubbling through the translation system. "Our deep space monitoring stations have detected massive energy signatures at the edge of Confederation space. Something very large is moving toward our territory. The council chamber fell silent as data flowed across their displays. The energy readings were unlike anything in their databases. Whatever was approaching was huge, powerful, and completely unknown. How long until it reaches our outer worlds? Chancellor Vorthek asked. At current speed, approximately 18 hours, Lieutenant Coral replied. But Chancellor, there is something else. The energy signature matches some fragmentary records in our oldest military databases, records that mention something called the Void Swarm. Every being in the chamber turned to look at Kelthera, whose silver skin had gone pale. She had spent the last day reading about the Void Swarm, and if the ancient records were accurate, the Confederation was about to face something that had nearly destroyed the galaxy 5 centuries ago. What do we know about this Void Swarm? Chancellor Vorthek demanded. Kelthera's hand shook as she accessed her research. According to the human records, they are artificial beings that consume organic matter and energy. They travel in massive swarms that can strip entire star systems of life. The records suggest they come from outside our galaxy and appear every few thousand years. Admiral Rex's tentacles moved in agitation. If these creatures are so dangerous, how did our ancestors survive their last visit? According to these files, Kelthera said quietly, they survived because the humans fought them. The records describe a 50-year war that ended with the humans driving the Void Swarm back into deep space. But the cost was enormous. The human civilization was nearly destroyed in the process. Before anyone could respond, Lieutenant Coral's voice crackled over the communication system again. Chancellor, we have new contacts. Multiple ships of unknown design have just appeared at the edge of our sensor range. They are moving to intercept the energy signatures we detected earlier. Can you identify them? Admiral Rexus asked. Negative. Admiral, the ship designs do not match anything in our databases, but they are broadcasting on old military frequencies that have not been used for centuries. The message is simple: stand by for fleet identification. The council chamber held its breath as they waited. On the main screen, they could see distant points of light moving through space with precision that spoke of advanced technology and expert handling. Then, a voice came through the communication system that made Kelthera's hearts nearly stop. This is Captain Elena Rodriguez of the Terran Defense Fleet, aboard the TDF Vigilant. We are responding to Void Swarm activity in this sector. Please identify yourselves and your defensive capabilities. The voice was clear, confident, and speaking a language that the translation systems recognized as an ancient dialect that appeared in the oldest records. Chancellor Vorthek stared at the communication panel as if it had personally offended him. Terran, he said slowly. That was another name for humans in the old records. Kelthera could barely contain her excitement. They are real. The humans are real, and they have been out there all this time, watching and waiting. Admiral Rexus took control of the communication channel. Captain Rodriguez, this is Admiral Rexus of the Stellar Confederation Defense Force. We represent 15 species in peaceful alliance. Are you saying you are human? There was a pause before the response came. Affirmative, Admiral. We are the descendants of the humans who fought the Void Swarm 500 years ago. We have been maintaining watch at the galaxy's edge, monitoring for their return. I am afraid that time has come. The implications hit the Council like a physical blow. The legends were real. Humans had survived, had been protecting the galaxy for centuries without anyone knowing, and now they had returned because the ancient enemy was awake again. Chancellor Vorthek found his voice first. Captain Rodriguez, we request permission to meet with you directly. It seems we have much to discuss. Agreed, Chancellor. But I must warn you, we do not have much time. Our sensors show the first Void Swarm scouts will reach your outer settlements within 6 hours. The main swarm will follow within days. We need to coordinate our defenses immediately. As communication channels opened between the human fleet and the Confederation command centers, Scholar Kelthera realized that everything was about to change. The peaceful existence the Confederation had enjoyed was ending, but perhaps they were not as helpless as they seemed. The legendary protectors had returned, and with them came hope that the galaxy might survive what was coming. Dr. Marcus Chen materialized on the Confederation flagship's bridge through their newly established transport system, and the alien crew got their first close look at a living human. He was shorter than most of the species they knew, with brown skin and dark hair that was beginning to show gray. But his eyes held a depth of knowledge and determination that impressed even the skeptical Admiral Rexus. "Dr. Chen," Admiral Rexus said, his tentacles moving in formal greeting patterns. "Captain Rodriguez said you are their expert on the Void Swarm. We need to know what we are facing." Dr. Chen activated a holographic display that filled the bridge with images that made several crew members step back in alarm. The displays showed dark, writhing masses that seemed to absorb light, moving through space like living shadows. "The Void Swarm is not a single species," Dr. Chen explained. "They are a collective of artificial organisms designed for one purpose: to consume all organic life and energy they encounter. They reproduce by converting the matter they consume into new swarm units. A single scout, if left unchecked, can multiply into thousands within weeks." "How did you learn to fight them?" asked Lieutenant Zara, a young Xanthari officer whose skin flickered with nervous patterns. Dr. Chen's expression grew somber. "At great cost. Our ancestors fought them for 50 years and learned their weaknesses through trial and error. We discovered they have a hive mind structure with central nodes that control smaller units. Destroy the nodes and you can disable entire sections of the swarm. But they adapt quickly, so tactics that work once may not work twice." Admiral Rexus studied the tactical data flowing across his screens. "What are their capabilities?" "They can move through space without traditional propulsion. They can phase through most energy shields, and they can absorb and redirect energy weapon attacks. Kinetic weapons work better, but they have to be precisely targeted. Most importantly, they are drawn to populated worlds with high energy output. They will head straight for your largest cities." The weight of this information settled over the bridge crew like a heavy blanket. They were facing an enemy that seemed designed to counter everything the Confederation relied on for defense. "There is one more thing," Dr. Chen continued. "The Void Swarm operates on cycles. They appear, consume what they can, then retreat to the space between galaxies to process what they have gathered. Based on our calculations, this cycle should have brought them back 300 years ago. The fact that they are only appearing now suggests something has been delaying them." "What could delay creatures like that?" Admiral Rexus asked. Dr. Chen smiled grimly. "Us. The human fleet has been conducting hit-and-run attacks on their gathering points for centuries, disrupting their preparations and buying time for the galaxy to grow stronger. But they have adapted to our tactics, and now they are coming in greater numbers than ever before." As if summoned by his words, alerts began sounding throughout the bridge. Lieutenant Coral's voice came over the communication system with barely controlled panic. "Admiral, we have multiple contacts dropping out of hyperspace near the Kepler system. They match the energy signatures of the approaching swarm." The main screen shifted to show the space around New Harmony, and the sight that greeted them confirmed everyone's worst fears. Dark shapes were emerging from the void, dozens of them, each one larger than the biggest Confederation battleship. They moved with alien grace toward the populated worlds, and smaller shapes began detaching from them like seeds from a pod. "The first wave has arrived," Dr. Chen said quietly. "Admiral, you need to evacuate your civilian populations immediately and prepare your defenses. Captain Rodriguez and the human fleet are moving to intercept, but we will need your help to protect your people." Admiral Rexus was already issuing orders, his tentacles moving rapidly over his control surfaces. "All Confederation forces, this is Admiral Rexus. We are facing an invasion by hostile forces of unknown capability. Implement evacuation protocols for all civilian populations and prepare for defensive action. This is not a drill." As chaos erupted around the bridge, Scholar Kelthera found herself standing next to Dr. Chen, watching the approaching darkness on the main screen. Why did your people sacrifice so much to protect a galaxy that did not even remember you existed? She asked. Dr. Chen looked at her with eyes that held the weight of centuries. Because someone has to stand watch, Scholar. Someone has to be willing to pay the price so that others can live in peace. That is what humans do. That is what we have always done. The price of protection. The space around New Harmony erupted into chaos as the first Void Swarm scouts reached the outer defensive perimeter. The elegant crystal towers that had stood for centuries as symbols of peace now served as beacons for an enemy that fed on the energy of civilization itself. Emergency sirens wailed across 15 different frequencies as species after species received the evacuation orders that would save their lives. Captain Elena Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the TDF Vigilant, watching the tactical display with the calm focus of someone who had trained for this moment her entire life. Around her, the human crew worked with practiced efficiency, coordinating with their alien counterparts in a dance of desperation and determination that would determine the fate of billions. Swarm composition analysis complete, reported Commander Sarah Walsh from her tactical station. We are looking at approximately 200 scout units, 50 medium forms, and 12 heavy nodes. The pattern matches historical attack formation Delta 7. Elena nodded, her fingers moving across her command interface. Signal the Confederation fleet. We are implementing Defense Protocol Shepherd's Wall. Their ships will form the outer perimeter while we engage the heavy nodes directly. On the bridge of the Confederation flagship, Admiral Rexus received the human tactical plan with a mixture of relief and concern. The humans clearly knew what they were doing, but their strategy put them in direct danger while keeping the alien forces in relatively safer positions. Captain Rodriguez, Admiral Rexus communicated over the combined fleet channel. Your plan puts your forces at extreme risk. Our ships are expendable, but if we lose your fleet, we lose the only people who know how to fight these creatures. Elena's response came back immediately, her voice carrying the weight of centuries of sacrifice. Admiral, with respect, that is exactly why we must take the risks. Every Confederation ship that survives this battle means more families that get to go home tonight. Every life saved is worth the price we pay. Dr. Chen, monitoring the conversation from his position on the alien flagship, felt pride and sorrow in equal measure. This was humanity at its core, taking on the greatest burdens so others would not have to carry them. The first engagement began when the Void Swarm scouts reached the outer defensive line. The alien weapons, designed for conflicts between civilized species, had limited effect on creatures that could absorb energy and adapt to conventional tactics. But the humans had spent 5 centuries learning to fight an enemy that defied conventional understanding. Kinetic barrage, Pattern 7, Commander Walsh ordered. Target the node clusters and ignore the scouts. They will collapse when we take out their controllers. The human ships moved like predators, their weapons firing solid projectiles at specific angles and velocities that the Void Swarm could not simply absorb. Each shot was calculated to cause maximum disruption to the Swarm's communication network, turning their greatest strength into a weakness. But the enemy was learning too. As the first wave of scouts fell to human tactics, the medium forms began adapting their approach. They spread out, making it harder to target multiple units with single shots. Some began emitting energy fields that deflected kinetic weapons, while others started moving in unpredictable patterns that made targeting difficult. They are adapting faster than the historical records indicated, Dr. Chen reported, his voice tense with concern. The delay we caused in their cycle gave them time to evolve new countermeasures. On New Harmony, the evacuation was proceeding with remarkable efficiency considering that most of the population had never experienced anything more dangerous than a traffic dispute. The various species were working together, using their different abilities to help each other reach safety. The Aquarians were using their pressure suits to help others in areas with damaged atmosphere systems. The Krillians were using their natural armor to shield more vulnerable species from debris. The Xantheris were using their multiple arms to carry supplies and injured people. But in the command center deep beneath the capital, Chancellor Vorthak was coordinating more than just an evacuation. He was watching the human fleet sacrifice itself piece by piece to buy time for alien civilians to escape, and it was changing his understanding of what leadership meant. "How many human ships have we lost?" he asked his aide. 17 confirmed destroyed, Chancellor. But their sacrifice has eliminated over 60% of the first wave. The remaining swarm units are retreating to await reinforcements. Vorthak studied the tactical display, seeing patterns that his military advisors had missed. They are not just fighting the swarm. They are studying it. Every engagement is teaching them something new about how the enemy has evolved. His aide, a young Krillian named Thek, looked confused. "I do not understand, Chancellor." "Watch their attack patterns," Vorthak explained. "They are varying their tactics with each engagement, testing different approaches. They are willing to accept losses in small battles to gain knowledge that will help them win the larger war. This is strategic thinking on a level we have never seen before." The truth of his observation became clear when the second wave of Void Swarm forces arrived. This wave was larger, more organized, and clearly adapted to counter the tactics that had worked against the scouts. But the humans were ready for them. "All ships, implement Protocol Broken Mirror," Captain Rodriguez ordered. "Let them see what they expect to see." The human fleet suddenly changed its approach entirely. Instead of the kinetic weapons that had been so effective, they began using energy weapons that the swarm could easily absorb. Their formation became predictable, their movements following patterns that the enemy could anticipate. The Void Swarm took the bait, moving in to exploit what appeared to be human weaknesses. But as they closed the distance, the trap was revealed. The energy weapons had not been meant to damage the enemy. They had been modified to track the swarm's absorption patterns and map their internal energy distribution systems. "Now," Commander Walsh said quietly, "the human ships fired a coordinated barrage of kinetic weapons, but these were not aimed at the swarm's exterior. They were targeted at specific points where the absorbed energy was being processed and distributed. The effect was devastating. Swarm units that had seemed invulnerable suddenly collapsed as their own absorbed power turned against them. But victory came at a cost. The intense coordination required for the attack had left the human ships vulnerable, and the dying swarm units released massive energy discharges that crippled several human vessels. As the second wave retreated, Admiral Rexus opened a direct channel to Captain Rodriguez. "Captain, our engineers are analyzing your tactics. We think we can modify our weapons to use similar principles, but we need time to implement the changes." Belena's response was immediate. "How much time do you need?" 48 hours minimum." "You will have it. The human fleet will buy you 48 hours. Dr. Chen realized what she was saying and felt his heart sink. "Elena, the main swarm will arrive in 36 hours. You cannot hold them off for 48 hours with what you have left." Captain Rodriguez's voice, when it came back, carried the calm certainty of someone who had made an impossible choice. "Marcus, I need you to transfer to the Confederation flagship and help them implement the weapon modifications. The human fleet will do what we have always done. We will stand watch." As the largest battle in galactic history approached, something remarkable began happening throughout Confederation space. The various species, inspired by human sacrifice and determination, began volunteering for combat duty in numbers that surprised their own leaders. Engineers worked around the clock to modify weapons based on human designs. Factory workers increased production of kinetic ammunition. Even civilians began contributing, donating resources, and organizing support for the military effort. Scholar Kelthera found herself in the unusual position of serving as a liaison between human tactical advisors and Confederation strategists. Her historical knowledge, combined with her newfound understanding of human psychology, made her uniquely qualified to translate human military thinking into concepts the other species could understand. "They do not fight like any species we know," she explained to a group of Confederation officers. Most races fight to win territory, resources, or dominance. Humans fight to protect. Everything they do is built around the idea that their sacrifice can save others. This makes them incredibly dangerous to enemies and incredibly valuable as allies. The main void swarm arrived exactly when Dr. Chen's calculations predicted it would. The force that emerged from the dark between stars was larger than anything in recorded history. Thousands of units, including massive forms that dwarfed entire space stations, began moving toward the populated worlds of the Confederation. But they were not facing the same galaxy that had nearly fallen 5 centuries ago. They were facing a united force of 16 species, armed with weapons based on human innovation and tactics, led by beings who had learned that true strength came from protecting others. The battle lasted for 3 days and 2 nights. Human ships fought with desperate courage, buying time for their allies to implement new technologies. Confederation forces discovered bravery they did not know they possessed, standing alongside the legendary protectors against an enemy that threatened all life. In the end, it was not superior technology that won the day. It was the willingness of different species to sacrifice for each other, inspired by humans who had been doing exactly that for centuries. When the last Void Swarm unit was destroyed or driven back into dark space, the galaxy had changed forever. The Stellar Confederation expanded to include humanity as its 16th member, but more importantly, all the member species had learned what it meant to be truly united. Captain Elena Rodriguez, her ship battered but intact, stood on the bridge looking out at the combined fleet of human and Confederation vessels. Commander Walsh approached with casualty reports that could have been much worse. Final tally, Captain. We lost 32 ships and over 8,000 crew members. But Confederation losses were less than projected, and civilian casualties were minimal. Elena nodded, understanding the true meaning of the numbers. Thousands of humans had died, but millions of other beings would live because of their sacrifice. It was a trade that humanity had been making for centuries and would continue to make for as long as someone needed protection. Dr. Chen's voice came over the communication system from the Confederation flagship. Elena, Admiral Rexus wants to know if humanity will consider a permanent alliance. They are offering full membership in the Confederation and joint defense agreements. Elena looked out at the stars, thinking of all the humans who had lived and died in the darkness between galaxies, standing watch so others could live in the light. Tell them yes, Marcus. Tell them that humanity accepts. After 500 years of silence, it is time for us to come home. Scholar Kelthera, watching the celebration on New Harmony as news of the victory spread, updated her historical records with a new entry. The Age of Legends was over. The Age of Unity had begun, and somewhere in the depths of space, both human and alien children would grow up knowing that there were those who stood watch, ready to pay any price to keep the darkness at bay. The galaxy was safe, but more than that, it was united. And that unity, forged in the fires of desperate battle and sealed with the blood of heroes, would endure long after the stars themselves grew cold.